Okay, so Chinese demand for gold, a huge factor in the continuing gold bull market. The collapsing U.S. dollar, a huge factor. The subprime mortgage meltdown, a huge factor. The fourth major factor in this ongoing bull market is the escalating conflict in the Middle East. There will be soaring Middle East demand. There already is soaring Middle East demand for gold. The wheels really are coming off in the Middle East with the Iraqi civil war turning into a Shiite, Sunni killing frenzy and American troops stuck in the middle. Okay, and even though it all slowed down and looked over for a few months like it was getting better, and if you'll note in the last month or two, getting worse again. Al-Qaeda and Syria are backing the Iraqi Sunni minority, while Iran is backing the Iraqi Shiite majority. Both sides of the civil war hate America and want us out of Iraq and out of the region. So keep your eyes on this Middle East map, because this is probably the cradle of World War III. World War III probably will start in this region, and the things that are going to happen are absolutely incredible. Now, we have two of our presidential candidates that are now on record that they will pull the troops out immediately. Let me give you a couple of thoughts on the Iraq War. I thought it was a mistake going into the Iraq War, and I've mentioned that very loudly in my newsletter back in 2003. And I had several reasons. I thought, number one, you know, Saddam was a strong man. He was a strong man like Tito in Yugoslavia. Tito was a bad man. He was a nasty communist, and nobody mourned him when he died. But you know what? He had all these disparate groups in the Balkans, the Bosnians and the Croatians and the Serbs and so forth, and they were always fighting and warring against each other. And if one of them stuck up their heads, bam, he chopped off about 10,000 heads. And there was peace and stability in the Balkans when Tito was the dictator of Yugoslavia. Tito died, boom, it all fell apart. Okay, same thing with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was not a good guy. He was a bad guy. Isn't it interesting that we're now maybe about to elect a president whose middle name is also Hussein? Could they be related? I have no idea. And by the way, it's interesting to me also that the press will never use that name, that middle name. You will almost never see that mentioned. You know, that's another story. Saddam Hussein, a bad guy, yes, but a guy who basically kept some degree of stability in there. He basically kept the Shiites and the Kurds and the Sunnis apart, and he kept Iran at bay. Now, the radical fundamentalists had come to Iran, in power in Iran in 1979 when Jimmy Carter helped overthrow the Shah of Iran and place Khomeini in power. That is the way it happened. And so this fundamentalist revolution began to break out. It's begun to spread now all over the world, literally, but certainly all over the Middle East, and it came out of Iran. But the Shah of Iran, Saddam Hussein, kept the Iranians at bay. He was basically a secular Muslim. It was not a radical fundamentalist. Okay, we got rid of him, and the whole region destabilized, and that's exactly what we said would happen in our newsletter back in 2003. We said the region would destabilize, it will fall apart, and you're going to have civil war, and we're stepping into a giant quicksand bog that we do not really understand, and unfortunately that's exactly what's happened. Now, you got two of the candidates talking about pulling the U.S. troops out in fairly short order, as I understand their positions. And as much as I think this war was probably a mistake, if we pull the troops out very quickly, let me tell you something, the fundamentalist revolution will sweep out of Iran. It will cover the entire region. They will overthrow the Saudi royal family, and you will see hell on earth break out in the Middle East. And by gosh, that'll give you $2,000 or $3,000 gold, but it's absolutely a very bleak scenario, but that's what two of the three major candidates are pushing for. Okay? Obviously, what's happened in the Middle East has had big impact on the price of oil. Can you believe that oil has gone in the last 10 years from $10 to $110? I can't keep our charts updated. It's now $117 as of today. It's gone up tenfold, 11-fold, almost 12-fold in just the last 10 years, partly because of the conflict in the Middle East, also because of China and their incredible consumption. And as we said, we think oil is going to $150 to $200 a barrel. Iran and its radical fundamentalist government has now emerged as the dominant power in the region. Iranian Shiite fundamentalists are spreading their holy war against non-Shiite Muslims, against America, Israel, and all Western influence across the entire Middle East. A new radical alliance is now emerging between Iran, its allies Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas in the Gaza Strip and West Bank. The Shiite leadership of Iraq, which will rule in close alliance with Iran if or when America pulls out of Iraq. Also closely allied with the radical fundamentalists are Russia, Red China, and North Korea, who are pouring sophisticated missiles, warplanes, tanks, anti-naval weapons, and an army of high-tech arms into Iran and Syria. Now here's a little tidbit that you might find interesting. Tremendous controversy at the beginning of the Iraq War as to whether there were really weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or not. And I think since things have transpired over the last couple of years, President Bush, and I am not a real big fan of President Bush, I disagree with much of what he does, but he was kind of discredited because there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and there were a lot of them, and in the weeks before that war broke out, they were moved out by convoys into Syria, and those convoys were operated by Russian Spetsnaz troops. Okay, and those weapons of mass destruction are primarily chemical weapons are now sitting over in in Syria. Syria actually tried to use them against Jordan and was stopped. That attack using those weapons. By the way, these were by and large Russian weapons that had come into Iraq that then got moved by the same Russians, different Russians, Spetsnaz, over to Syria. Some of them got down into Jordan. They thwarted that attack, et cetera, et cetera. And those weapons of mass destruction are still sitting in Syria. So the tinderbox is just, it just gets bigger and worse all the time.